I'm Laquan Jones with NFL Media, and this is my top 5 must-have fantasy players for 2022. Coming in at number 5, Dalton Schultz, currently tight end 6. Once all the big-name tight ends are gone, I'm smiling and waiting for Dalton Schultz. He had a career high in touchdowns, yards, and receptions. I look for him to raise the bar higher this season. He proved to be a reliable tight end last season for Dak with a 75% catch rate and finished first in catch percentage among tight ends with minimum 100 targets. Target share should increase with Amari Cooper out of town. The 8 touchdowns is my favorite part about his stats. He finished second behind Amari Cooper in red zone targets last season, ahead of CeeDee Lamb. Dak only has CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, the veteran guys who are game day ready and healthy. I look for him to make an impact and finish as a top 4 tight end this fantasy football season. Coming in at number 4, I got Derek Carr. I've been aggressively acquiring Derek Carr this offseason in drafts just based on what he's been able to do last season. He didn't fold or break with any of the distractions with the team last season. He was able to do this. Top 5 in passing yards, top 5 in air yards, top 5 in deep ball attempts, and top 4 in pass completions. And he also finished number 1 in play action completions. He did all this without the new addition of the freak athlete Devontae Adams. So what do we think is possibly going to happen with Derek Carr having his old buddy in town? Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow also locked and ready as well. I got Derek Carr as a top 10 lock this season. Do not leave draft day without him. Coming in at number 3, Ezekiel Elliott. The value is too good not to leave draft day with him. A lot of people are down on him this season, which is understandable, but don't be a sheep and follow the herd because Zeke is still a baller. Week 4, Zeke suffered a knee injury, and Week 5, Zeke suffered a rib injury as well. Here's what he did in those first 5 weeks. 5 touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown, 90 yards per game, 17 rushing attempts per game, and 5.3 yards per carry. Also worth mentioning, while banged up, he still had back-to-back games with 100 yards on the ground, Week 4 and 5. Tony Pollard does not scare me because Zeke still managed to have more touches per game, more rushing yards per game, and more scrimmage yards per game. Pollard is there to help, not take over the lead job. Let's get this straight. It's still Zeke's backfield. Buy the dip, win the ship. Now, coming in at number 2, Kirk Cousins. Captain Kirk himself is in store for a big season with Kevin O'Connell coming from LA, installing his pass-friendly offense, moving away from the offense with Dalvin Cook heavily involved. Kirk was number 1 in passer rating, 120.6 on deep passes with a 8-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, minimum 50 pass attempts. Also, he finished second in passer rating versus the blitz with 126.4 with a TD interception ratio of 16-0. Kirk might be the most disrespected quarterback in fantasy football, and I think this season Kirk makes a statement of why he belongs in that top 10 quarterback conversation. This offense is going to be hitting on all cylinders with Justin Jefferson and company, and my fantasy roster needs a captain to this ship to bring home the gold this season. My number 1 must-have fantasy player for 2022 is Joe Mixon. I gotta say, you're probably too low on Joe Mixon. Last season was prime example of Mixon being in the best offense he's been in his entire career, showing up and showing out on rosters. He finished top 4 in rushing yards, touches, and rushing touchdowns. Bengals seem to mean business with addressing the O-line this offseason to help Burrow, which also is a huge plus for Joe Mixon as well. Finishing last season as a top 4 running back in fantasy, we can only believe we have a repeat on our hands. Last season, he averaged 18 fantasy points per game. With recent comments from offensive coordinator Brian Callahan, Mixon likely to see more targets, and these are things I love to hear. So that was my top 5 must-have fantasy players for 2022.